My parents called me a leech in front of our guests. They demanded I leave the house I fixed up. I just nodded. The next day, I changed all the locks and revealed Grandpa's will. The smell of roasted garlic and rosemary was heavy in the kitchen air. It was a Saturday evening, and I was exactly 32 years old, standing over a massive granite island I had paid for, preparing a birthday feast for my mother, Pamela. If you had asked me right then, at 6 in the evening, I would have told you I was a lucky woman. I had a good career as a financial consultant, a family I loved, and a beautiful home that we all shared. Or so I thought. I wiped my hands on my apron and looked around the kitchen. The recessed lighting caught the edge of the custom oak cabinets. I remember the month I installed those. I was 26 back then. I worked double shifts at the firm, dealing with demanding clients until 8 at night, and then I would come back here, strap on a dust mask, and sand drywall until midnight. I remember my knuckles bleeding from scraping off the old, ugly wallpaper in the hallway. I remember the exact smell of the chemical stripper and the way my back ached for weeks when I laid down the new hardwood floors in the living room. Why did I do it? Because I had what my therapist later called a severe savior complex, specifically tailored to my parents. Victor and Pamela had always painted themselves as victims of circumstance. The narrative was always the same. They were getting older, money was tight, and the economy was ruthless. When I moved into this house 6 years ago, Victor sat me down with a heavy sigh and a pat on the shoulder. He told me that they were struggling to keep up with the maintenance. He said, "Madeline, you are a smart girl making good money. We are letting you live here under our roof. The least you can do is take over the upkeep so your mother and I can breathe." I swallowed that lie whole. I didn't just take over the upkeep, I became the sole financial engine of the property. I paid for a new roof when the winter storms hit. I upgraded the plumbing. I bought the appliances. I sacrificed my own 20s. While my friends were taking trips to Europe or putting down payments on their own apartments, I was buying bags of concrete and hiring electricians for a house I believed I was preserving for my family. And then there was Courtney, my younger sister, the absolute golden child. Courtney was 30 years old and had never held a job for more than 6 months. She was a professional dreamer, always bouncing from one failed business venture to another. A custom candle shop, a boutique dog clothing line, a life coaching seminar business, you name it, Courtney had tried it and failed spectacularly. And every single time she crashed, Victor and Pamela were there with an open wallet to bail her out. They would drain their savings, take out personal loans, and do whatever it took to shield Courtney from the consequences of her own actions. But me? I was the reliable one. The workhorse. The one who didn't need coddling. I convinced myself that my parents' reliance on me was a form of respect. I thought they saw me as an equal, a partner in keeping our family afloat. As I pulled the roast out of the oven and arranged the crystal wine glasses on the dining table, I felt a deep, warm sense of pride. I had built this comfort for them. I had created a sanctuary where my mother could celebrate her 60th birthday surrounded by friends and relatives in absolute luxury. I had no idea that the very floor I was standing on was about to be pulled right out from under me. By 8 o'clock, the dining room was buzzing with laughter. Relatives, neighbors, and old family friends were passing plates of food and pouring expensive wine that I had bought, naturally. I sat near the head of the table, smiling as Pamela opened her gifts. She looked radiant, playing the perfect hostess, laughing delicately at everyone's jokes. Victor was sitting at the opposite end, his face slightly flushed from the alcohol, projecting the image of a successful, benevolent patriarch. Courtney was sitting right next to him, scrolling on her phone, occasionally looking up to make a sarcastic comment. Dessert was served. I brought out the 3-tier chocolate cake I had ordered from the fancy bakery downtown. Everyone sang happy birthday. It was a picture-perfect moment. Then, Victor tapped his fork against his crystal glass. The sharp clinking sound cut through the chatter, and the room slowly quieted down. Victor stood up, adjusting his collar. He smiled, but it was a tight, practiced smile that didn't reach his eyes. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight to celebrate my beautiful wife, Victor started, raising his glass. There were warm murmurs of agreement from the guests. We have been through a lot over the years. Ups and downs. But family is what matters most. He looked over at me, and for a split second, I felt a swell of emotion. I thought he was going to thank me for putting the party together, or maybe even acknowledge the work I had put into the house. Instead, his gaze hardened. The warmth in his voice completely evaporated, replaced by a cold, businesslike tone. Which brings me to an important family announcement, Victor continued, his voice projecting across the silent room. Madeline, it is time for a change. Your mother and I have decided that we need to reclaim this space. You have 48 hours to pack your bags and vacate the premises. Be out by Monday. The silence that followed was so absolute, it was deafening. I felt like the air had been violently sucked out of the room. My brain simply stopped processing. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. A joke? A terribly timed morbid joke? But Victor wasn't laughing. He took a sip of his wine, looking at me with dead eyes. Excuse me. I finally managed to whisper. My voice sounded tiny, like it belonged to someone else. Victor sighed loudly, a theatrical display of patience. Don't make this difficult, Madeline. You have had a free ride living here for years. You are a single woman. You don't need all this space. Courtney's latest business didn't work out, and she is moving back in. She needs the master bedroom to set up her home office. A relative down the table gasped softly. Pamela didn't even look up. She just stared intently at a smudge on her fork. Courtney actually smirked. A real, genuine smirk, right to my face. A free ride. The words tasted like ash in my mouth. Victor, I paid for this dining table. I paid for the floor you are standing on. I remodeled this entire house with my own money. You did some minor decorating because you lived here rent-free as a leech, Victor snapped, his voice rising, shedding the polite facade entirely. It is our house. My house. And I am telling you to leave. Be grateful we let you stay this long. Monday. Don't make me change the locks. I looked around the table. Dozens of eyes were darting back and forth, entirely uncomfortable, but no one said a word. No one defended me. Not my aunts, not my uncles, and certainly not my mother. They were all complicit in this public execution of my dignity. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The betrayal was too massive to process with tears. I slowly stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood. I didn't say a single word. I walked out of the dining room, grabbed my coat from the hallway, and walked out the front door into the freezing night air. I got into my car and drove. I had no destination. I just drove the dark suburban streets for hours, the heater blasting, staring blankly at the yellow lines on the road. My mind was a chaotic storm of shock, anger, and profound confusion. A leech. My own father had called me a leech in front of 20 people, erasing 6 years of my financial and physical sacrifices in one sentence. He was going to throw me out onto the street so Courtney could have a massive bedroom to fail at her next fake career. It was past midnight when I finally pulled back into the driveway. The guests were long gone. The house was dark and silent. I sat in the car for a long time, looking at the facade of the building. I remembered paying the contractors for the exterior paint job just last summer. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside. The kitchen was a mess of dirty plates and half-empty wine glasses. I walked past it, ignoring the urge to clean. I went into my home office and locked the door. I needed logic. I needed data. Emotion was going to kill me, so I shut it off. I pulled open the heavy metal filing cabinet where I kept all my records. I pulled out thick folders filled with receipts, invoices, and bank statements. I spread them all out on the rug. Property tax bills, water bills, electricity, gas, internet, trash collection. Every single piece of paper had my name on it. Madeline. For 6 years, the county, the state, and the utility companies only knew my name in connection to this address. A cold, sharp question pierced through my fog of misery. Why? If Victor and Pamela were the absolute owners of this house, Why did they insist I put every single utility and tax bill in my name from day one? They had claimed it was to build my credit, but I already had excellent credit. They claimed it was just easier, but it made no logistical sense. I realized then that I had never actually seen the deed to the house. I just assumed it belonged to them because they were my parents, and parents don't orchestrate long con scams against their own children, right? I looked around the room, feeling like a stranger in my own life. They thought I was going to roll over. They thought I was so conditioned to be the obedient workhorse that I would just pack my bags, cry a little, and leave them the newly renovated house. They fundamentally misunderstood who I was. The Madeline who craved their approval died at that dinner table. I grabbed my phone. It was almost 2 in the morning. I opened a search engine and looked for a 24/7 emergency locksmith in the area. I found one that promised immediate dispatch for double the standard rate. I didn't care about the cost. I dialed the number. "Yeah, I need someone out here right now," I said when the dispatcher answered. My voice was completely steady, cold as ice. "I need every exterior door lock changed. Deadbolts, doorknobs, everything. And I need the highest security grade you carry." I gave them the address and hung up. I sat on the floor among my thousands of dollars worth of receipts. Victor had threatened to change the locks on me. He thought he held the power because he held the authority of a father. But I was the one paying the bills. I was the one who lived here. If this was going to be a war for the property, I was going to strike first, and I was going to strike hard. The locksmith arrived in a white van just before 3 in the morning. He was a burly guy with a heavy tool belt and a confused expression, probably wondering why a woman in sweatpants was demanding a full security overhaul in the dead of night. I didn't offer any explanations. I just pointed to the doors. I followed him from the front porch to the back patio, to the side garage entrance, watching as he drilled out the old hardware and installed heavy, reinforced steel deadbolts. Every time an old lock hit the floor, a tiny fraction of my anxiety evaporated, replaced by a rigid sense of control. By the time he handed me the heavy ring of new, shiny keys, the sky outside was turning a bruised purple. I paid him in cash, locked the door behind him, and engaged the new deadbolt. The click of the heavy metal sliding into place was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. Let Victor and Pamela come with their moving boxes. They were going to hit a literal brick wall. I brewed a pot of black coffee. I hadn't slept a single minute, but my body was running on pure, unfiltered adrenaline. The question of the deed was burning a hole in my mind. Where were the original documents? Victor kept his personal paperwork in a safe at his own apartment across town, but this house belonged to my late grandparents before Victor and Pamela moved me into it. My grandparents had lived here for 40 years before they passed away in a car accident when I was 20. I took my coffee mug and walked over to the hallway ceiling hatch. I pulled down the folding wooden ladder and climbed up into the attic. It was freezing up there, smelling of dust and old insulation. I clicked on the single bare bulb hanging from the rafters. The attic was a graveyard of forgotten family history. Stacks of old photo albums, broken holiday decorations, and plastic bins filled with moth-eaten clothes. I started digging. I didn't care about the dust covering my clothes or the fiberglass itching my skin. I moved boxes systematically, searching the darkest corners. After an hour of moving heavy crates, I saw it. Tucked all the way in the back, half buried under an old, rolled-up rug, was a heavy, rusted metal lockbox. It wasn't Victor's modern safe. It looked like something from the 1980s. I dragged it out into the light. It was locked, secured by a small brass padlock. I went downstairs, grabbed a heavy flathead screwdriver and a hammer from my toolbox, and went back up. It took 3 hard strikes to shatter the old padlock. My hands were shaking as I threw the lid open. Inside, it smelled like old paper and dried lavender. There were bundles of letters tied with string, old municipal tax records from the 90s, and a thick, yellowed manila envelope marked estate in my grandfather's neat, cursive handwriting. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I wiped the dust off my hands and carefully opened the envelope, pulling out a stack of dense, legal documents. Before I could even read the first page of the legal documents, the silence of the house was shattered by my cell phone ringing from my pocket. It was 7 in the morning. I pulled it out, expecting to see Victor's name, ready to demand my surrender. But the caller ID flashed a name I hadn't seen on my screen in almost 10 years. Aunt Diana. Diana was Pamela's older sister. They had a massive, explosive falling out shortly after my grandparents died and hadn't spoken since. Diana lived on the opposite coast and generally kept to herself. I stared at the phone for a few seconds, utterly bewildered, before sliding the accept button. "Hello," I rasped, my throat dry from the attic dust. "Madeline," Diana's voice came through, sharp and breathless. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "Tell me you haven't left that house." I'm still here, Diana. What's going on?" "I just woke up and saw Courtney's public Facebook post," Diana said, her voice vibrating with absolute disgust. "Your pathetic excuse for a sister is bragging to the entire world." She posted a photo of the house with a caption saying her amazing parents are gifting her a fully paid-off property to start her new life journey, and that she is getting the keys on Monday. "Madeline, tell me this is a sick joke." I squeezed my eyes shut, feeling a wave of nausea. Courtney couldn't even wait 24 hours. She was already parading her stolen prize on the internet. "It's not a joke," I said quietly. "Victor announced it at dinner last night. He told me to pack my bags. He called me a leech." There was a long, terrifying silence on the other end of the line. When Diana finally spoke, her voice dropped an octave, dripping with a cold, terrifying fury. "That miserable, lying son of a bitch," she hissed. "I promised your mother I would stay out of her twisted family dynamics, but this is crossing the line into pure theft. Madeline, listen to me very carefully. Do not pack a single box. Do not let them step one foot onto that property. Diana, they are my parents. If it's their house, it is not their house." Diana shouted, the volume making me pull the phone away from my ear. "It has never been their house. Madeline, when your grandparents died, they knew Victor was financially irresponsible. They knew Pamela spoiled Courtney rotten. They saw how hard you worked even in college. Your grandparents bypassed your parents completely." My breath caught in my throat. I looked down at the yellowed envelope in my lap. "The house was left to you, Madeline," Diana continued, her voice breaking slightly. "Solely to you. In the official will. Victor and Pamela were named as the executors of the estate because of your young age at the time, but the property was legally willed to you. They were supposed to formally transfer the deed to your name years ago. Have they been letting you pay the taxes?" "Every single bill," I whispered. "For 6 years. "Oh my God," Diana breathed. "They hid the will. They convinced you it was theirs so you would pay to maintain your own inheritance while they treated you like a tenant. Madeline, you need a lawyer. Today." I ended the call with Diana. My phone slipped from my fingers and clattered against the wooden floorboards of the attic. I sat entirely motionless in the dust for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. The world had tilted on its axis. My entire reality, the foundation of my relationship with my family, had just been completely incinerated. With trembling hands, I reached into the yellowed envelope. I pulled out the thickest document. It was a certified copy of the last will and testament of my grandparents. I flipped through the heavy, legal pages, scanning the dense paragraphs until a specific section jumped out at me. There it was, typed in stark, undeniable black ink. The property located at, followed by the exact address of the house I was sitting in, is to be bequeathed in its entirety, outright and free of trust, to our granddaughter, Madeline. Attached to the back of the will was a small, lined piece of notepad paper. It was a handwritten note from my grandfather, dated just months before the car crash. "Maddie," it read in his shaky cursive. "You are the strongest one in this family. Don't let your father waste this. Build a good life here. We love you." A single tear cut a path through the dust on my cheek, dropping onto the old paper. It wasn't a tear of sadness. It was the physical manifestation of a dam breaking inside my mind. I had spent my entire adult life believing I was indebted to my parents. I had crippled my own financial future, drained my energy, and accepted their emotional abuse because I thought I owed them for the roof over my head. They had stolen my inheritance. They had gaslighted me into financing the renovation of my own property, treating me like an unpaid contractor. And now, because they had bled themselves dry funding Courtney's delusions, they were trying to illegally evict me to hand my property over to her. It was a level of sociopathic greed that I couldn't fully comprehend. The sadness vanished, burned away by a cold, calculating rage. I wiped my face. I carefully placed the will, the deed, and my grandfather's note back into the envelope. I took the entire lockbox downstairs. I didn't feel tired anymore. I felt dangerous. I took a shower, washing the attic dust down the drain. I put on a sharp, tailored business suit, the armor I usually wore when dealing with hostile corporate takeovers at work. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was a hostile takeover of my life, and I was going to respond in kind. I went in my home office and booted up my computer. I opened my contacts list and found the number for Monica. Monica was a senior partner at a vicious real estate litigation firm. We had crossed paths during a corporate merger last year. She was notoriously aggressive, brilliant, and completely devoid of sentimentality. She was exactly what I needed. I dialed her office number. Her paralegal tried to put me off, telling me Monica was booked solid for the next 3 weeks. "Tell Monica it is Madeline from the financial consulting firm," I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Tell her my parents are executors of an estate who have concealed a will, committed massive property fraud, and are currently attempting an illegal eviction to steal a house I hold the legal right to. Tell her I have the original documents and a blank check for her retainer." I was put on hold for exactly 15 seconds before Monica picked up the line. "Madeline," Monica said, her voice brisk and professional. "Be in my office in exactly 1 hour. Bring everything. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment with the name of the city you are living in. Every comment helps the video reach more viewers. Thank you so much." The drive to downtown took 45 minutes, but I barely registered the traffic. My mind was running on a cold, mechanical loop. I parked in the underground garage of a sleek, glass-fronted high-rise building and took the elevator to the 35th floor. Monica's law firm smelled of expensive leather, fresh coffee, and intimidation. I didn't sit in the waiting room for long. Her paralegal ushered me straight into her corner office overlooking the city skyline. Monica was sitting behind a massive mahogany desk, wearing a tailored navy suit that probably cost more than my first car. She didn't offer me a warm smile or a cup of tea. She just pointed to the leather chair opposite her and held out her hand. I placed the rusted metal lockbox directly onto her pristine desk, opened it, and handed her the yellowed envelope containing the original will, the deed, and my grandfather's handwritten note. For the next 20 minutes, the only sound in the office was the crisp turning of heavy paper. Monica read through every single page with the focused intensity of a hawk. She cross-referenced the dates, checked the notary seals, and read my grandfather's note twice. When she finally put the documents down, she leaned back in her chair and steepled her fingers. "Madeline," Monica said, her voice completely devoid of emotion, "your parents are incredibly stupid criminals. What they have done here is textbook fiduciary fraud. As the named executors of your grandparents' estate, Victor and Pamela had a strict legal duty to execute the will exactly as written. By concealing this document and misrepresenting the ownership of the property to you, the rightful heir, they have broken several federal and state laws." Hearing a legal professional validate my reality felt like taking my first full breath of air in a week. I nodded slowly. "They want me out by Monday. They are trying to give the house to my sister, Courtney." Monica actually let out a short, dark laugh. "They cannot give away an asset they do not legally own. This house is yours. Period. We will file an immediate injunction to prevent any physical eviction or tampering with the property." However, she paused, her dark eyes narrowing. People who are bold enough to conceal a will for 6 years rarely stop at just one crime. If they felt comfortable lying to you about the house, they likely felt comfortable crossing other lines. "Have you ever given Victor or Pamela your social security number?" A cold spike of dread shot straight down my spine. "Yes," I answered, my voice trembling slightly. "When I first moved into the house, Victor insisted he needed it to set up the utility accounts in my name. I just gave it to him. He is my father. Monica pressed a button on her desk phone. Sarah, she said to her paralegal, I need a comprehensive, deep dive credit check and background financial sweep on Madeline right now. Pull everything from Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion. Top priority. She released the button and looked back at me. We are going to wait right here until those reports come back. I have a very bad feeling about this, Madeline. I sat in that plush leather chair for what felt like an eternity. The adrenaline that had carried me through the morning was beginning to wear off, replaced by a deep, gnawing anxiety. I stared out the floor to ceiling windows at the city below, trying to process the magnitude of the betrayal. My parents hadn't just used me for free labor, they had actively plotted against my financial future while smiling at me across the dinner table. They had watched me bleed my savings dry to fix a house they planned to steal. The psychological damage was worse than the financial loss. It was the realization that I had never truly had parents. I had handlers. And I was just waiting to see how deeply they had dug their claws into my life. The office door opened and Sarah, the paralegal, walked in holding a thick stack of printed papers. She didn't look at me. She placed the file on Monica's desk, her expression grim, and quickly left the room. Monica opened the file and began scanning the top pages. I watched her jaw tighten. She picked up a red pen and started circling multiple lines on the paper. Every scratch of that pen sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. Madeline, Monica said softly, looking up. The cold professionalism in her eyes had been replaced by genuine pity, which was somehow much worse. Brace yourself. She spun the file around and pushed it across the desk toward me. My eyes scanned the highlighted sections. There were credit cards I had never applied for. A personal loan from a bank I had never visited. A small business credit line from an online lender. All of them were opened within the last 3 years. All of them were maxed out or severely delinquent. $30,000, Monica stated, her voice cutting through my rising panic. Victor and Pamela used your social security number, your excellent credit score, and this property address to open 4 separate accounts. The total outstanding debt currently sitting in your name is slightly over $30,000. The room started to spin. I gripped the armrests of the chair to steady myself. $30,000. That was the exact amount Victor had miraculously come up with last year to fund Courtney's disastrous boutique dog clothing business. I remembered sitting in the living room as Victor proudly announced he was investing in his youngest daughter's dream. I remembered feeling a brief pang of jealousy that he had never offered to help me financially, followed by guilt for being selfish. I hadn't been selfish. I had been their unwitting bank. They had stolen my identity to fund the sister who despised me. How could they do this? I gasped, feeling physically sick to my stomach. The banks, the verification. How did they get away with it? They had your social security number, your date of birth, and access to your mailbox at the house, Monica explained clinically. They likely intercepted the physical mail and managed the accounts entirely online. It is one of the most common forms of identity theft, and unfortunately, it is usually committed by a family member. It is called familial fraud. A wave of absolute rage washed over me, burning away the nausea. They had crossed every conceivable line. They had not only stolen my past and my present, but they were actively destroying my future credit. What do we do? I asked, my voice dropping to a low, dangerous register. I want them ruined, Monica. I don't care that they're my blood. I want to burn their lives to the ground. Monica smiled. It was a terrifying, shark-like smile. That is the exact attitude I need from you. First, we spend the next 3 hours in this office filing formal police reports for identity theft. We will put fraud alerts and security freezes on your credit files with all 3 major bureaus to stop any further bleeding. You will sign affidavits of forgery for every single account. She pulled out a fresh legal pad. Simultaneously, my team is going to draft a massive civil lawsuit. We are suing Victor and Pamela for breach of fiduciary duty, grand fraud, identity theft, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We are going to demand full repayment of the $30,000, plus punitive damages, plus attorney fees. And we are going to petition the probate court to immediately strip them of their executor status and formally transfer the deed into your name. I spent the rest of the afternoon signing my name on dozens of federal forms. Every time I wrote Madeline, I felt a piece of my old, naive self dying. By the time I left Monica's office, the sun was setting. I was officially a victim of massive fraud, but I didn't feel like a victim anymore. I felt like a loaded weapon. I drove back to the house, parked in the driveway, and locked myself inside my fortress of new steel deadbolts. I collapsed onto the sofa, utterly drained. My phone had been vibrating nonstop in my purse for hours. I finally pulled it out and looked at the screen. I had over 50 missed calls and hundreds of text messages. While I had been sitting in a law office discovering a $30,000 financial betrayal, Courtney had been busy orchestrating a public execution of my character on social media. I opened Facebook. Courtney had posted a massive, multi-paragraph essay, tagging dozens of our mutual friends, extended family members, and people from our hometown. The post was a masterclass in manipulation. She claimed that I had suffered a mental breakdown after our mother's birthday party. She wrote that I had locked our elderly, struggling parents out of the family home out of sheer greed and jealousy. She painted herself as the protective younger sister, desperately trying to keep the family together while I acted like a greedy monster. "My heart is broken," Courtney wrote at the end of the post, adding a crying face emoji. "My parents sacrificed everything for Madeline, and this is how she repays them. Please pray for our family during this nightmare." The comments section was a war zone. People I had known since kindergarten were tearing me apart. An old high school teacher wrote, "I am so disappointed in Madeline. How could she do this to Victor and Pamela?" A cousin from Texas commented, "She always was a selfish brat." "Courtney, let me know if your parents need a place to stay." My phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text message from Pamela. It read, "Madeline, please stop this insanity. Your father is having chest pains from the stress. We just want our house back. Don't make us call the police on our own daughter." They were gaslighting me on a massive, coordinated scale. They were trying to apply so much social and emotional pressure that I would simply crack, hand over the keys, and disappear. The old Madeline would have panicked. The old Madeline would have written a frantic, defensive comment on Courtney's post, trying to explain the truth, begging people to believe her. But I had Monica now. I had the original will. I had the police reports for $30,000 in stolen identity funds. I didn't need to argue with flying monkeys on the internet. I walked into my home office, sat at my computer, and opened a fresh digital folder. I methodically took high-resolution screenshots of Courtney's entire post. I took screenshots of every single defamatory comment made by my relatives. I took screenshots of Pamela's manipulative text messages. I saved everything. Monica had mentioned suing for defamation, and Courtney was practically handing us the evidence on a silver platter. I didn't reply to a single text. I didn't answer a single phone call. I went into my phone settings and temporarily disabled all notifications. Let them scream into the void. Let them think they were winning the public relations war. They had no idea that a legal hurricane was currently forming off the coast, and it was heading straight for them. I went to the kitchen, poured myself a large glass of water, and went to bed. I slept deeply and without dreaming for the first time in months. When Monday morning arrived, the 48-hour deadline Victor had set would expire. He promised he was coming to take the house. I was ready for him. Monday morning broke with heavy, gray clouds and the threat of rain. It was exactly 48 hours since the dinner party. I didn't go to work. I had taken an emergency leave of absence from the consulting firm, citing a severe family crisis. I sat in my living room, drinking black coffee, wearing comfortable clothes, and staring at the iPad propped up on the coffee table. The screen displayed the live feed from the 4 high-definition security cameras I had installed around the property's exterior. At exactly 10 in the morning, a large white moving van pulled onto my street and idled heavily in front of my driveway. Victor's silver sedan parked right behind it. My pulse quickened, but I forced myself to take slow, deep breaths. I tapped the screen to unmute the audio feed from the front porch camera. Victor stepped out of his car, looking furious. Pamela followed, clutching her purse to her chest, looking around nervously to see if any neighbors were watching. Courtney hopped out of the passenger side, holding a large iced coffee, looking incredibly smug. They walked up the driveway together, a unified front of entitlement. Victor marched straight up the porch steps. He didn't bother knocking. He pulled his old brass key from his pocket and aggressively shoved it into the front door lock. The camera caught the exact moment of confusion on his face when the key wouldn't turn. He pulled it out, looked at it, and shoved it back in, twisting his wrist violently. Nothing happened. The heavy steel deadbolt the locksmith had installed was unyielding. "Madeline!" Victor roared, pounding his heavy fist against the solid oak door. The microphone picked up the loud, thudding impacts. "Open this damn door right now. I know you're in there." I sat on the sofa, taking a sip of my coffee, watching him lose his mind in high definition. Courtney stepped up behind him, her smug expression faltering. "Dad, what is going on? Why isn't the key working?" "She changed the locks." Victor screamed, his face turning a deep shade of purple. He kicked the bottom of the door, leaving a scuff mark on the wood. "That ungrateful little bitch actually changed the locks on my house." Pamela immediately started her performance. She leaned against the porch railing and began to sob loudly. "Madeline, please," she wailed toward the closed windows. "We have the moving truck rented by the hour. Courtney needs to move her things in. Why are you doing this to your family? Please, baby, just open the door." It was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. If I hadn't found that rusted lockbox in the attic, if I hadn't seen the $30,000 of debt under my name, that crying voice would have broken me. I would have opened the door and apologized. But the illusion was shattered. I saw Pamela for exactly what she was, a predator wearing a mother's mask. "I am calling the police," Victor barked, pulling out his cell phone. "I am going to have her arrested for trespassing." I almost laughed out loud. I wished he would call the police. I had a file folder sitting on the kitchen counter containing the deed, the will, and the police reports for his identity theft. But Victor was all bluff. He paced the porch for another 15 minutes, screaming threats, banging on the windows, while Pamela cried and Courtney aggressively typed on her phone, probably writing another social media post about her victimization. Finally, realizing that the door wasn't going to open and that Mrs. Gable from across the street had come out to her porch to watch the spectacle, Victor ordered them back to the cars. "This isn't over, Madeline," he screamed at the security camera, pointing a shaking finger directly at the lens. "I am going to the county clerk. I will have you thrown out by the sheriff." They got into their vehicles and drove away, the moving van following awkwardly behind. I let out a long, shaky exhale. The siege was over, but the war had just escalated. Victor had threatened to go to the county clerk. He was desperate, and desperate men make fatal mistakes. I sent the video clip of his tantrum to Monica, locked my phone screen, and waited for their next move. 2 weeks passed. The silence from my family was absolute, but it wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the tense, suffocating quiet that happens right before a bomb detonates. I spent my days working remotely, managing my clients, and ignoring the continuing barrage of hateful messages from distant relatives who had bought into Courtney's online narrative. On a Tuesday afternoon, I went out to check the mail. Among the junk flyers and utility bills was a thick, official-looking envelope stamped with the seal of the county clerk's office. My stomach tightened. I took it inside, grabbed a letter opener, and sliced it open. It was a notification of a property filing. I read the dense legal jargon, my eyes scanning the paragraphs until I hit the critical information. Victor had filed a title amendment application. In the attached documents, he claimed that he was the primary financier of the massive renovations done to the property over the last 6 years. He had submitted dozens of falsified invoices, claiming he had paid the contractors in cash. On the final page, there was a document titled Quitclaim Deed, bearing a signature that was supposed to be mine, effectively transferring 50% of the property ownership into Victor's name. He had forged my signature. The sheer audacity of it took my breath away. Victor wasn't just a manipulator, he was entirely detached from reality. He believed that his authority as a father somehow elevated him above federal law. He thought the county clerks would just process the paperwork and hand him the house because he submitted a fake piece of paper. I didn't panic. I didn't cry. I picked up my phone and called Monica. He forged a quitclaim deed, I said the moment she answered. He submitted fake renovation invoices and forged my signature to claim co-ownership of the house. I could hear the vicious, predatory grin in Monica's voice when she replied. Excellent. He just handed us the rope to hang him with. Madeline, bring that envelope to my office immediately. Do not lose the original envelope. We need the postmark date. When I arrived at her office an hour later, Monica was already barking orders at her paralegal team. She took the county documents from me and laid them out next to the original will and my actual signature on the police reports. The forgery is amateurish at best, Monica noted, adjusting her glasses. A first-year forensics student could tear this apart. This changes our timeline, Madeline. We are moving from a defensive posture to a scorched-earth offensive. Monica worked late into the night. By Wednesday morning, she had filed an emergency injunction with the probate court, immediately freezing all title transfers or legal actions regarding the property on Oak Street. She submitted the original will, the grandfather's handwritten note, and an affidavit from me detailing the concealment of the estate. But Monica didn't stop there. We are officially filing the civil suit today, she told me, handing me a massive stack of bound legal documents. We are serving Victor and Pamela with a lawsuit for grand fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and the $30,000 of identity theft. And we are adding Courtney to the lawsuit. Courtney? I asked, surprised. Yes, Monica smiled coldly. We are suing Courtney for intentional defamation and libel per se, based on those lovely social media screenshots you provided. We are going to bleed them dry in civil court while the district attorney decides whether to press criminal charges for the forgery and identity theft. I have hired a private process server. They are going to be served at Victor's office building at noon today. I imagine Victor sitting in his comfortable office, drinking his coffee, entirely confident that his forged deed was going to work, only to have a stranger hand him a massive stack of legal papers that completely dismantled his entire life. It was the first time in weeks that I felt a genuine, profound sense of peace. The trap had been set, the bait taken, and the steel jaws had just slammed shut. The deposition took place 3 weeks later in the largest conference room at Monica's firm. The air conditioning was turned up high, making the room feel like a meat locker. I sat at the long mahogany table next to Monica, wearing a sharp black suit, a fresh notebook resting in front of me. The heavy glass doors opened, and Victor, Pamela, and Courtney walked in, followed by a sweaty, overworked-looking lawyer they had clearly hired out of desperation. Victor tried to project his usual aura of dominance, puffing out his chest and glaring at me across the table. Pamela looked pale and exhausted, clutching her purse. Courtney refused to look at me, staring angrily at her phone. A court reporter sat at the head of the table, fingers hovering over her stenography machine. After the swearing-in process, Monica took control of the room. She didn't raise her voice. She was lethal and precise. She started with Victor. Under oath, Victor confidently repeated his lies. He stated for the official record that he had purchased the materials for the house renovations. He stated that the house was his property, gifted to him by his parents. He stated that he had never opened any credit accounts in my name. So, to be absolutely clear for the record, Mr. Harris, Monica said smoothly, you are claiming you never saw a will from your late parents leaving the property solely to your daughter, Madeline? There was no such will, Victor scoffed, crossing his arms. My parents left everything to me. Madeline is a confused, vindictive girl. Monica didn't blink. She reached into her briefcase and pulled out the original, yellowed will. She slid it across the polished wood table. It stopped exactly in front of Victor's lawyer. Exhibit A, Monica announced clearly to the court reporter. The original last will and testament, naming Madeline as the sole inheritor of the property, which the deponent, as executor, illegally concealed for 6 years. Victor's lawyer read the first page, and the color instantly drained from his face. He looked at Victor with an expression of pure horror. Before they could recover, Monica pulled out a second thick file. Exhibit B, sworn affidavits and fraud reports from Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, tracing $30,000 of unauthorized credit lines opened using Madeline's social security number. The IP addresses used to open these accounts trace directly to your home router, Victor. Pamela let out a small, terrified whimper. Victor stared at the papers, his mouth slightly open, the arrogant facade completely shattering. He looked like a deflated balloon. Monica wasn't done. She slid a final stack of papers toward Courtney. And Exhibit C, 75 pages of time-stamped social media posts and comments constituting documented, malicious defamation by Courtney against my client. Victor's lawyer threw his hands up. "We need a recess," he stammered, pulling Victor out of his chair. "We need a recess immediately." As they scrambled out of the conference room in a panicked herd, Monica looked over at me and gave a single, satisfied nod. The deposition was over. They had perjured themselves, and we had buried them in their own lies. The civil trial never happened. Faced with insurmountable evidence of forgery, identity theft, and perjury, Victor's lawyer forced him to settle entirely on our terms to avoid us pushing the district attorney for serious prison time. The judge signed the final order in a brief, quiet hearing in the county courthouse. The verdict was absolute devastation for my family. The judge formally stripped Victor and Pamela of their executor status and legally secured the deed to the house in my name alone. They were ordered to repay the $30,000 of stolen debt, plus $20,000 in punitive damages and all of my attorney fees. Courtney was ordered to post a public retraction and apology on all her social media platforms and was hit with a $10,000 fine for defamation. But the legal penalties were nothing compared to the social execution. Public court records are exactly that, public. Word spread through our hometown like a wildfire. The narrative Courtney had so carefully crafted completely collapsed. People who had known our family for decades suddenly understood the truth. Victor and Pamela weren't poor, struggling parents victimized by a greedy daughter. They were sociopathic con artists who had stolen their own child's identity to fund their golden child's failures. The fallout was spectacular. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Victor was forced to step down from the board of his local Rotary Club in disgrace. Neighbors stopped waving to Pamela at the grocery store. Instead, they turned their carts around and walked down different aisles to avoid her. They became social pariahs, whispered about in coffee shops and shunned at community events. Courtney's public apology post was a masterpiece of humiliation. She was forced to admit, point by point, that she had lied about me. Her friends abandoned her. The people who had called me a monster in her comment section suddenly deleted their messages and pretended they had never been involved. A few weeks after the judge's order, I received a pathetic, groveling email from Pamela. It was a long, rambling message blaming Victor for everything, claiming she was just a victim of his financial control, and begging me to meet her for coffee so we could heal as a family. A day later, Courtney texted me, asking if she could borrow $1,000 because her parents' accounts were frozen to pay my settlement. I sat in my home office, reading their desperate words. I didn't feel anger anymore. I didn't feel sadness. I felt absolutely nothing for them. They were strangers who shared my DNA. I highlighted both messages, clicked the block button, and routed their email addresses permanently to the spam folder. The silence that followed was beautiful. Despite the victory, the house on Oak Street felt tainted. Every time I looked at the beautiful hardwood floors, I remembered the lies. Every time I walked into the kitchen, I saw Victor smirking at that dinner table. I realized that keeping the house meant keeping a monument to my trauma. I needed a clean slate. I hired Penelope, a highly aggressive and successful real estate agent. She walked through the house, taking notes on her tablet, absolutely thrilled with the condition of the property. "Madeline, you have done incredible work here," Penelope said, admiring the custom kitchen island. With the current market inventory, we can list this 20% above the neighborhood average and still start a bidding war. She was right. The house sold in under a week. Because I had essentially rebuilt the interior over the last 6 years, and because the property was entirely paid off by my grandparents, the closing check was massive. After paying Penelope's commission and the closing costs, I walked away with over $200,000 in pure profit. The $30,000 settlement money from Victor eventually cleared, wiping out the fraudulent debt and repairing my credit score. I packed my clothes, my computer, and a few personal items. I left all the furniture behind for the new buyers. I didn't want anything that held the scent of my past. I moved 3 states away, to a vibrant city where no one knew my name or my history. I bought a sleek, modern condo in a high-rise building overlooking the ocean. It was entirely mine. No ghosts in the attic, no strings attached, no family guilt weighing down the foundation. I stood on my new balcony, holding a glass of wine, listening to the waves crashing against the shore far below. I thought about the 6 years I had lost, the sweat and the tears, and the brutal reality of familial betrayal. But I also thought about the strength it took to fight back, to drag the truth into the light, and to sever the toxic roots that had tried to strangle me. I had survived the fire, and I had used the ashes to buy my freedom. Victor, Pamela, and Courtney were still back in that small town, suffocating under the weight of their ruined reputations and shattered finances, forever trapped in the miserable dynamic they had created. And I was here, breathing clean air, completely untouchable. So, after they tried to steal my future, destroy my credit, and ruin my name, am I wrong for ignoring their begging letters and erasing them from my life completely? Thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please hit that button and join me for more stories.